you get a pass on your stuff, you've got a B. If you get a high pass, then that's an A. So that's really good. Um, and then the combination, as long as you are doing your work, everybody should get a B. If you don't revise something, that's when it would be a problem. You don't put something in. That's where it would be a problem. So you want to make sure you turn all your stuff in like that. Okay, so if you just started, I unmuted everybody, I think. Let me try that again. Please unmute it. Yeah. So you guys are muting yourself, which means over here by the mute button, you probably pushed it like this. Now you can't hear me. Same way with the video. If you've done this before, you know how to do it. But if you haven't, if you stop video, we can't see you. And so it's better to see faces unless you're just like breaking out. Because this can be like class. And so I'm going to eventually put you guys in a group where you can talk to each other. So hopefully at least you'll share your face then. Don't be scared about that. But I notice you mostly have your phones off. So you probably want to put your phones on so we can talk a while. And then I'll turn everybody off when I'm just doing a lecture. But okay. So we'll give it a couple more minutes. I have a bunch of stuff to show you guys, so I guess I could just show you a couple of things while we're waiting. So there's a little chat feature right here. I'm going to put that up. So if you guys want to just say hi, or whatever you like to say, like this. You might say this. I don't know what you might say. But this is a place to put questions too. So if you have questions, if you have any little questions, just go to chat and see at the bottom here, you can type it in. Or if you have any comments that you want to say, anything you want, put in there. Okay. So people are starting to join now. It's a matter of, depends on what your time says. Oh, somebody's brave enough to see their face. Hey, Shaylin.
Hi.
Look at all those people. They don't want to show us what they look like now.
I don't have a webcam.
Oh. Well, listen, I shaved for everybody because I hadn't shaved. Imagine what that looked like.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I put a clean sweatshirt on. I mean, I'm trying.
Appreciate it.
Oh, sure. You're probably in pajamas.
I'm not a pajamas professor.
Oh, okay, never mind. I'm not asking. Okay, it's fine. Yeah. So, all right. But if you're comfortable, you really want to put your face on. So you want to put the video on and put your mute off so that you can kind of talk, and then it can be like class. Otherwise, we're like, I don't know, it's weird. So, but it's kind of up to you. By the way, where I am is in my little office, which is a tough shed. So I put a tough shed in my backyard, and I fixed it up like an office, so it's not bad. It's got heat. Well, it's got a plug-in heat. So that's where I am. You're in your backyard, Shaylin?
Yes, I am.
That's comfy.
Right?
You got breakfast?
Yeah.
Listen, I have cookies. I have coffee. Actually, I have more than one coffee. I have come. Coffee. Yeah. I'm trying to keep them out of the way so it doesn't. Oh, there's your dog. Look at that.
Yeah, she's hanging out back here too.
Don't blame her. All right. So, oops. Let me get some. So there's some more people. Can everybody see everybody? Little squares? Okay.
Get down.
Except we can't see anybody but just the two of us. So, Catherine, do you have a picture? Want to put a picture up? Maybe not. Um, some people don't want to put a picture, but that's all right. You'll have to live with mine then. Sorry. I apologize. Okay, so again, I feel like I gave you, let me go through this again. So you can mute or unmute it right there. It would be nice for everybody to have it unmuted. Video here, you can either, I can like stop the video, you won't see me, you can hear me, start the video. I'm going to be sharing, so I'm going to click on this little share thing, and what will happen is, can you guys see this little share piece?
The share screen?
Yeah.
Not yet. We can't see the screen that you're sharing, but we see that you can share screen.
Okay, that's what I meant. Yeah, so I'm going to be doing that in a minute. The chat thing is on, so you guys again can type in here what if you want. This is breakout rooms, so I'll be putting you guys in breakout rooms after we've kind of talked a little bit about this. We'll be doing that. Let's see, we have 2 pages here. Oh, there they are. So there's a lot of people in here now. And there'll be more people joining, so we'll look at that. I have it recorded, so what I'm going to be able to do is send you guys a link, which means that whatever we talk about, you can look at it again. A lot of times it's helpful for people to refresh what they did, and and everything will be, a little video. It'll be a long video though, but I think you can speed through it. So, okay, so let's kind of start with some stuff, some handouts to look at, because I know I pushed you through it. The idea is you're looking at the image and you're trying to figure out what it's trying to communicate. I mean, that's what you're doing. So the visual analysis itself is actually kind of a detailed explanation of how you see it and how you think the audience sees it, and if it's effective, what its message might be, things like what sort of genre is it. So if it's a public service announcement, you would want to tell people, hey, it's a PSA, and what they usually do is they're trying to get out a message to the public, usually about a health issue or something that's unsafe. So you would want to explain that when you say it's a PSA, or if it's social commentary like that. So the first thing I want to do is look at the outline. I changed it a little bit because I don't normally, so we'll go there. Yep. So I don't normally do it in this kind of detail for the first part. So let's see. So I changed the introduction a little bit because hook. So in the one that the originally gave you, I didn't put hook because anytime you're starting a paper, you want a hook. And the hook should be probably something that relates to the theme. So if you're looking at that little boy, then it would be maybe something about verbal abuse, or maybe about something about parents and their stress and how do they deal with the stress when they have children, or something about this issue that, for instance, we don't spank kids anymore, and there's just something like that, just to relate it, just bring it into it. And then you want a little overview, which is a brief description of what the piece looks like. So you might say, well, when someone's viewing the image, they would see this little child, this little boy, who seems to be crying. He seems to be holding back a lot of emotion. He's looking up at someone who's done something to him that he trusts. There's a metaphorical hand around his neck. And let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna get out of this for a minute because I think somebody came in, so I need to add them. Yeah, right. I think everybody's in now. So back to share. Again, I changed this a little bit because I put the hook in, overview, one or two sentences describing what the image looks like. And then once you sort of explain what somebody might see, because you're trying to feed them into it a little bit, then, you know, what's the name of the visual? If it's got a name, you would want to use it. The little boy, you could say, was words hurt, but some of the stuff, like the Martin Luther King one, is not named. So you would just have to describe that this particular image is the focus would be Martin Luther King. Or if you were looking at the one that is named, that I think a lot of you guys are doing, is this cycle of abuse, I think it is. And you would say that, and then if you can find out who the creator or designer is, maybe a little background on them, not a lot, just some. The year it was published is good if you can find it. Background of the author published, what do they usually draw or work with? And that would be helpful. And then what's the purpose of this particular piece? Why is it a PSA? Is it social commentary? If you were looking at the one with the little girl between the two McDonald's and the Mickey Mouse one, then you would say that's a political commentary, and what that might mean, and why she was juxtaposed, or rather placed between those two iconic figures. Why? But you want to explain when you have a PSA, what is expected. And so what we would expect is that they're trying to communicate, make people aware. They might even want to try to make them act on something. Who the target audience is, like who was this thing aimed at, if it was, or was it the general public, and what the message might be. And then the thesis is the last piece in that introduction, and it would be kind of talking about, well, was it successful? So you guys had to do an introduction. This is kind of what it looks like. If we wanted to look at, let's see, somebody's, which is not your class, so that's good. If we wanted to look at this one, there's the analysis, but here's the introduction that this guy wrote. And so he starts off not with the hook. He doesn't start off with the hook. He does sort of do a description of what it's about, but there's no name to it, so maybe he would just do it that way. There could be a little more about what Martin Luther King is doing in terms of why have him, and you know, what is he communicating through his eyes, something like that. But this is great background. So he said it's from a letter in Birmingham, so we know right away. And then he mentions it's 1956, which is a long time ago. But that's when they had a boycott of the buses, and he led it, and it was successful. And in that way, they ended segregation, which is pretty cool, because that's Birmingham, Alabama. The quote on the piece is the letter from Birmingham jail. And again, I think I gave you guys some background, so these are not the same at the same time. This is a couple of years later, but you can see he was still, so it's, what is it, 7 years later, so he's still doing his thing. And at this point, the movement had gotten larger. And so he was one of the leaders, and so they wanted to get rid of him if they could, and they put him in jail. There's some interesting videos on this that you can actually look at, where they had fire hoses, and they were using the fire hoses and dogs, mostly against children, because the children, what happened was, he was arrested, all the adults were arrested or dispersed. And then the background on that is that this guy was a disc jockey on the radio station. He said, wouldn't it be great if we all got together, and he was talking to kids, he knew his audience was, and went out there and did another march. And their march was very important because all the TV stations in the country and actually the world covered it. It was quite violent. And so that's really kind of how this thing works. So there's a lot of background to this. So what he talks about is, so he says these two elements that he's talking about, the picture and the situation is not ethical. And so that's sort of the purpose and the message. And then he says this is a social commentary about that, but he doesn't really explain what a social commentary does, what the purpose of it is, or how it might work. And so you'd want that in there. And this is good right here. This reminds the viewer that they should think for themselves. So this is the target audience. So he might want to put in their target audience. And this is directed as a social activist, so that's target audience. And this last sentence here is good because that's your thesis. So he says the image is successful, and this is the big thing you have to say in conveying the message. So that's really, really important. If we were looking at, let's see, I think it's under here. This one, which I think I sent you. This was written like a year ago. 2008, no, that's 2 years now. So he starts, he doesn't have a hook. He sort of starts with background really on what is bulimia. And what's good about this stuff right in here is that it sort of adds importance to where his discussion is going to go. So that's not a bad opening. And then he relates this to young women and how it's sort of caused. So that's really good stuff. It's not the typical opening, but it's quite good. And then he gives some background on it, which is what your intro is asking for. Who did it? What is it? And here's a really, really brief description of what it looks like. Here's when it was published. He found that out. And he addresses who the audience is. So he does this really quickly, pretty effectively. And then example of public service announcement, and then he explains it why, because it promotes this stuff. So that's better with the public service announcement. And here's his thesis in it. The visual is dramatic and emotional, which effectively grabs the audience attention and delivers the message about the issue of people successfully. So that that's pretty good. And that's sort of a setup of what the introduction looks like. If you're signing in late, don't worry about it. This is being recorded, so what I'll end up doing is sending you guys the link. And then if you came in late and you missed something, then you can click on the link and it'll go right through the class again. Any questions on intro? Anybody? Zachary, you have any questions? You're muted. And I can't, you mute yourself. Okay. Jasmine, any question?
Okay. Yeah, I had a question.
All right. Sorry.
I was just wondering if you uploaded that somewhere because it's still the old one under our files. So is it somewhere else?
I did, but you know what? I'll look at it again. So if we go to files, let me go to files. Okay. I have to share to do this for you. And let's see where I might have it. Okay. So let's say I get out of this for a minute. And I go to files. I think everything is a little slow now because of everybody's using the internet. And I look at, where am I? Oh, do that. Yeah, so this one is up to date. The handout I gave you doesn't look like this because I added this piece right here. The rest is pretty much the same, I think, but just looking at what people had been writing, and then what they've done in the past, I just felt I needed to add this for you because you're not thinking about that, but you know, it's something always to be thinking about. You want people to be interested in your paper, and how do you do that? So you usually some statistics, some hook, some quote from somebody. You could share a little teeny story. I mean, not a little anecdote if you wanted, well, as long as it wasn't too long. Or mention someone you knew, something like that. So those are all kind of good things. So it's in there, but you know what? When we're done with this, I'll go back and make sure it's working for everybody. That's a good question.
Okay, yeah, because in my upload, it doesn't say you uploaded anything yesterday. It says the last time was like the 16th or the 21st.
Okay, let me check me and see what it does on mine. Okay, we're sharing, we hope. Yep. Okay, so let's do that. Um, yeah, no, I don't think it actually does say when I've changed the files. Yeah, but I changed it yesterday because I knew I'd be talking to you guys. So maybe I'll send for the people that didn't come to class, I'll send them a little email, something to let them know. That was a good question. Anybody else have a question? Because I've unmuted you, so that means you can actually ask questions. Okay, so I'm thinking at this point it might be good to put you into groups so you guys can talk about how you're doing with your introduction. Let's just go there with that part. So there's 15 people. I'm going to put you in 4 groups, I think. It'll just be random. And what you guys need to do is join the group, and also please unmute yourself so you can talk. You know, if you have something you want to do in there, yeah. Okay. Hello? So here we go. I'll assign you.
Hello? Hi.
Oh, you have a question?
How are you?
Okay. Let me, all right. I think okay. So we're going to go in there for maybe up to 10 minutes. We'll just see how you guys are doing. I can actually jump into your rooms too and check them out. Hey, Zachary, did you not get assigned to a group? Okay, I think we're back now. We're out of the rooms now. So what we're going to do now is kind of look at the design analysis. Anybody have any questions about the introduction?
No.
Okay. Well, if you don't think about it, I mean, if you have none right now, then you can, when you think of something later, make sure you just email me or through Canvas, and I'll answer. Easier face to face. Okay, so we're going to start this other one and look at that. So this is the page, and that's sort of marked up. I'm not sure I put this in files. I think I did. If I didn't, I'll add it to your files. You have chapter 6, but this is maybe better because it's marked. So, okay, I just wanted to go through this with you. I know you should have had a chance to read it. If not, then I'll send you this, put it under files and you can look at it. But it's sort of the high points. So it's talking about how this is something that we do all the time now, that we have to sort of be smart about that and, have our critical abilities developed in terms of what these things might be communicating. And so some of the things, if you were going to analyze it or even design it, would be basic questions like, what's the purpose of the image? Like, why am I looking at this? Who's the audience? In what social or political cultural context does this visual appear? And that's the other thing when you talk about context. So if we were looking at the three boys, which we'll look at maybe later, or if we were looking at the cycle of abuse, which is the males and the man and the boys that represent him and his growing up and how he developed his anger. Most cultures allow males to be, actually don't allow males to express their emotion very well. So they tend to turn to anger or more positive ways or exercise. Some people drink, some people use drugs, but especially parents are often unusually stressed today, the way we live. And they think because they're not spanking someone, it's not a physical harm. You can't see the harm. That screaming and yelling is okay because they're I don't think they often realize that they're really getting rid of their own emotions. It's not so much about correcting the child, because there are many good ways to correct children, even though they're pretty hard-headed and they have their own idea what they want to do. But there's something about our culture and maybe the context of our culture, how that might be important, or the bulimic one. In our culture, when we think about the media and how it impacts especially young women, that might be important in terms of context. Who's the author? The author might be sort of someone that does this all the time. If it's a design person, then he might have just been paid to do it. We want to think about what appeals for the audience, so the target audience. So are they using emotion to sort of get us to think about our values and maybe change or act on them? Does it have some information, some logos, some logic, so that if we were looking at the boy, the words on the boy's hand get us to think in terms of the words we actually say? Or if we were looking at, again, the bulimic one, if we're looking at the so-called blood spatter, the stuff coming out of the back of her head, that's statistics in terms of bulimia and what happens to people. So we want to kind of consider this when we're doing our our visual analysis. And then also in terms of context, it's both immediate, where you might see it. In this case, I didn't tell you guys where these pieces were placed, so you can't really do anything with that. In the past, I've used magazine articles that actually people had brought in. So if you were reading on Men's Health or something like that and you found a visual, then that might be important. Or if we were looking at something like Newsweek, that might be important, because that is also geared toward a particular audience. So that would be the immediate one. And the more general one, the cultural context. So how would anybody in society, even if they don't read those particular pieces, feel about it? Or what might it do? So theoretically, when we're looking at how this works, we have the visual, this piece that we're looking at. And then we have to think about the writer or the designer and what they were trying to do to communicate something. And then we want to consider what did they do, and that's where we're looking at the techniques. What did they do to make this work? So you, as the reader and the audience down here at the bottom, are looking at this whole piece and trying to figure out what's going on. You may feel what's going on, but you want to be able to explain what's going on. So you would start with the visual. That's what the design analysis piece is. If there's any text that's involved with it, you would want to say, well, okay, the visual is kind of like this when we add the text into it. And with the text, you're looking at things like font size, placement on the image, things like that, and how that changes maybe the way the original meaning was, or adds to it, enhances it, or something. And then context has to do with, again, this is an immediate and the more general thing, the society that it's in. So this is theoretically what you're doing. So techniques, the techniques over here on the right side of the page starts here. And so design analysis, in particular the layout. So where do we see things? Where are the objects placed? What's the balance between them? How does color work there to bring out the either the emotion in the person viewing it, or to kind of communicate what the message might be? Who are the key figures in this? Why those figures? Is anybody symbolic or iconic? Is there something like that in there? Cultural references. The one with the males around the table is the immediate reference is probably a Mexican family, but the more general reference is families, and how men were raised and how men act. What's the purpose? What do you think the purpose is? Who's the audience? And what claim can you make about it? Is it successful? Is it doing this thing? So you want to do those things. Then, still looking at the design analysis, we want to know if there's any text. And we want to look at stuff like the font size and things like that. And what the words are actually saying, and does it complement? Does it actually add to it, or is it confusing, or what does it do? And sometimes with these pieces, they'll have a phone number, for instance, that they've made you feel something and they want you to call this phone number, or go to this website, or join this group. Context we've talked about. The genre. Genre is kind of important. So you guys are looking at, you're looking at an image, but it's a particular genre. So when you get to that point and you're talking about the genre, you want to use your handout that kind of looks like this. If it's a social commentary, you want to explain it that way, that this is what it usually does. Promoting change in the society over a problem or a sense of injustice. I don't think anybody's just doing visual artwork, so none of that. Political criticism. The piece with the little girl being the Vietnam piece with the little girl. And there's a sort of a commentary that the guy Banksy is making on American society and how we are sort of arrogant about the way we say, well, we treat children very nicely, and yet in other countries, not so much. We don't do that so much. And so he's making a comment about that and the cost of war to those countries. Satire is when they're sort of ridiculing something. So if we were looking at the three little boys together with the car, that's satire. making fun of people that are, well, of who probably people with money are, or even all of us, if we're all in probably a better position than the homeless people or a lot of people. PSAs, most of you will have PSAs. And so you want to kind of describe what a PSA is. Usually short. It's trying to change attitudes or behaviors. That's going to help you with your messaging or the purpose. Uses emotion. And there's usually a tag on the thing that either comes in the beginning or the end that's got the name of the organization, maybe phone number. And then, and again, the purpose is usually increasing awareness or changing attitudes. Okay. The criticisms about the PSAs are they don't really tell you what you're supposed to do. What can you do? They don't really tell you. They just say, hey, this is terrible, and somebody ought to do something. So that's that part of this, the genre of the visual. This piece here, we're looking at your appeals. So you want to think about, well, does it appeal to logic and reason? So if we were looking at the anorexic one, yeah, because of that information coming out of the back of their head to emotion. If we were looking at the little kid crying, yeah, because it makes us feel sad about how some child is having a hard time. And children really shouldn't have that kind of treatment. So those kind of things. And then over here, it's asking you to composition. So this is a sort of a main thing you guys are going to be doing. Who or what is pictured? How are the things arranged? So if this were an image, this piece right here would be called the foreground. The part in the back here would be the background. And if it were centered like that, that would be the center of focus. And we would want to know, is there a relationship between the center of focus and the background? I think with your particular pieces, there isn't. Something more like a newspaper image or something like that. If somebody was excluded from the piece, like the little boy looking up, the person that's caused this pain to the little boy is not there. But when he looks up, he puts the viewer, the person looking at the image, in the position of actually the one having done it. So that's pretty cool. Color, how does color work in there to either convey emotion, or if we're thinking about this cycle of abuse, we're looking at, it's very dark, brown, sepia sort of color. It's like what happens in the dark, what happens in private places, that kind of thing. Contrast of light and shade. So again, if we were looking at the men, they all have white shirts on, but the background is all dark. The repeated figures in that one are the man at different ages. So that's emphasizing. And then how does this all come together to create the purpose and the message? Focal point. This is a cool way to start your design analysis. So you want to think about, what does the eye see? You want to start there first. Like, what do you see first? Image or point, or if it's the words, what do you see first? And then move around in the image. What do you see next? What happens next? What happens next, like that? The narrative, if you think this is telling a story, the cycle of abuse, obviously telling a story. Then you want to sort of suggest that what this is representing could be standard in almost anyone's home, family. Themes, this can be interesting. Who has the power on the visual? Again, if we were looking at the little boy, it's the person outside the visual. He does not. Sexist, racist, or body image. The body image one, sure, for the anorexic one. Oops. And you guys may have more insight than I do in terms of sexist and racist. So when you look at them, if you're feeling that way, then you can talk about that. Okay, so that's the main stuff there. Does anybody have any questions on that? Comments? So look, I want to look at a couple of the files first and just talk about them, and then I'm going to put you guys into groups, and you think about your design analysis and things you might be, I don't know, concerned about. So let's look at some of those pictures first. Okay, we don't want that.
I cannot. I'm still in my class. I will let you know when I'm done.
So here's the three little boys. Social commentary, wouldn't you say? And it's satirical also because it's making fun of this one. In terms of ethos, pathos, and logos. Personally, I feel a lot of pathos that these little boys are feeling like. Obviously, they're coming from poor backgrounds. They seem to be taking on the role of their parents. This seems to be a message sort of communicated by society in terms of how they're supposed to act. Same way with this boy. Selfish, really not thinking of others, and sort of a comment on society. And then the red car, that's, you know, everybody wants a red car, it's a Porsche. So there's some stuff to be thinking about there in terms of social stratification or how we treat each other. And we said this was Poland, really, so it's not the United States. But again, in terms of the United States, it's us. This one I think a lot of you guys are doing. The person that made it is up there, Blake Ebel. This may or may not work anymore. I'm not sure this link works. But if you look up Words Hurt, you're going to find information about it. So you can find when it was published. And I think it was, no, I forget now, I don't want to say. So, and when we're talking about the text and the image, you have two things going on. And so, but when you look at it, you want to, again, start with, what do you see first? What would a person see first? Kind of go through it that way to analyze it. I don't think anybody's doing this one. If somebody is having trouble, this is the one I would do, because it's pretty easy. I can't go there down. I mean, if I clicked on it, I could bring it up. But so she's got her hand in her mouth. She's sort of shooting, but we know she's just throwing up. But what happens is, if this were blood spatter, you have a lot of information, which would be sort of logos, that kind of thing. And then, of course, the context is anorexic in our society, women, media, things that you might think of like that. This is the Vietnam one. I don't think anybody's doing this one, but if you do, the guy that made it is called Banksy, V-A-N-K-S-Y. And he's a sort of he's an activist, and he's sort of makes comments on how society treats each other, especially countries like the United States, how they treat other countries. And these are both iconic, the McDonald's and the Mickey Mouse, so you would want to, what do they represent? And what does she represent? So there's a bunch of stuff you can say about this one. Nobody's doing this. Or if you are, I think it's a great one because it's reverse on who has the power there, and the woman has the power. The camera represents her desire. Camera always, the image that's looked through, that's received by the camera is the target of desire, which women are usually the ones, the objects. In this case, it's the man, and he's a little, you know, uncomfortable. I mean, he's having fun, but he's uncomfortable. So that's kind of good because he's no longer a person, really. I mean, he is, but he isn't. in terms of her desire. So that's a switch on all that. This one, I don't know if anybody's doing this. That's the Teletubby, the purple Teletubby that theoretically there was a kind of a born-again Christian organization located in Virginia. I'm not thinking of family something. And this guy came out with this theory that Tinky Winky was trying to convert Americans into being gay, but of course it's wink. Difficult to see how that's true. Homophobia, you know what that is? That's an unusual fear of a particular thing, any kind of phobia. So that's something to talk about. And it's kind of violent for the threat that represents.
No, I have to do this right.
So this is the Martin Luther King one. A number of you are doing that.
Doing that one.
When you talk about it, you want to mention that the top of his head is cut off. He has this number around his neck, which was his prison number when he was put in jail. And this piece here that actually was out of a letter to Birmingham that he wrote, really important. And we don't know when this was published, and yet in terms of current society in the context, it's important because think about Black Lives Matter. Think about how people of color are treated. And the idea is that if we just let that voice out there say that we're lesser or somebody's unimportant, bad things happen. So got to speak up. Got to challenge the law. That's kind of what it's trying to make you do. This one's a cycle of violence, and I know a lot of you guys are doing that. If we were just looking at color, this is a sepia. It's a sort of a brownish color, but you notice there's no light coming like out of the window. It's like maybe night or something. I don't know. Even this transom light over the door, there's no light. Only the white on the males, all the males, and there's a light coming, I think, from above on them, on each one. Somehow it hits them that way. The little boy, if you look at the bottom, has spilled some milk. He feels because this little boy spilled the milk, it can smack him really hard, which I think is overkill. But also, look at how angry he is over milk. It's kind of ridiculous. This little boy becomes this boy, and he's still fearful, and he's trying to hold it inside. I'm angry that this man has done this to him. This one is getting older, and he's starting. You can. If you look at his hands, he's got like fists there. So he's really starting to get mad. And then if you go over here, this one looks the most like the dad, and he's starting to raise his hand. So it's very interesting to see that. And we said in this one, we don't see a mom. We're seeing kitchen curtains. We know that there's a mom in there because it's all, it's all nice. It's all like a family room. There's little magnets on the refrigerator. We know this is normally a happy family, except for him and his problem. And so we might want to look up how males handle emotion in our society or any society. We might want to look up what is a macho male, although I'm not sure that's what it is. And you would find that males have very high rate of depression in society, usually unreported because we won't do it. So there's a bunch of stuff to talk about there. Okay, so we'll get out of that one. We'll be back to this one. All right, so again, I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms, back in groups, and I want you guys to talk about that stuff. If you didn't get it all at once, again, I'm going to be sending you the little recording so you can look at it again. You can kind of go through it to find the points, the parts that you like or that you need to look at. Make sure you unmute yourself and join so people can talk to you. Okay. So I'm going to try the same rooms and we'll see if that works again. Okay.
Did we lose half the class?
No, they're still in their meetings.
I don't know. Gotcha.
Another what? Yeah, I had a duplicate of that, so that's why I gave it to you. Thank you. Sorry. You like duplicates? I do, just
Oh, jeez.
very careful. I never.
I think somebody's still in the room, so I'm gonna have to,
Or smell.
like, I suppose I'm free to say it. Okay. Well, let's see. Well, we'll see what happens when they close. Think they'll come back? Maybe. Okay. Maybe everybody is here. Okay, so we looked at the introduction. We looked at the design analysis. The rest of the paper is pretty standard, but we ought to just go over that sort of that piece of it. So let's do that. So the introduction I thought was maybe the more difficult one, but it's if you just sort of follow through that, and then you guys, once you're into the way you want to write, I mean, into your sort of into the mood, it'll flow. So the body paragraph, we talked about that design analysis one. This one right here, this cultural context, probably is going to need some research. So you want to kind of think about that immediate context, which is, what immediately, where was the context of that piece probably, and then what is it like in our society, and how does that relate to our society and why they might be sending that message. So you would look at the image, and it would all those things relate to our society. And there's sort of a commentary on our society and trying to get us to be better people, I think is the way I look at it. So that's its own paragraph. This other one, this paragraph is a small paragraph, probably maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 sentences. Doesn't sound long to me, but anyway. So go through the message and talk about those appeals, ethos, pathos, and logos. And we're really interested in this paragraph on the impact on the target audience. So how did all that stuff work to convey the message? So you can bring up the color if you thought that was really important. Some particular piece of an image if you thought that was really important, and then associate it to the appeals, with what appeals. And if at this point you've decided that the target audience might change a little bit based on the context, you can sort of talk about that too. Your conclusion, kind of go back to what you started, like, oh, this is successful and the reasons for it, and how that cultural impact research really contextualized it and added to the meaning of it, what it might mean. And if you feel it's making an argument, you want to talk about that there and it's successful or not. So you just really want to close this down. And the piece that I didn't put in there is if you have any insight that you have about that you would like to share in there, that might be good. So it's something like that. Okay. So that's kind of all we need to talk about here. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Anything they want to?
Those notes that you just read over, those are posted on Canvas.
I'll check. I think they are, but you're talking about the chapter, right? The highlighted part.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll put it on. If it's
Okay.
not on, I'll put it on. Yeah, because you don't want to have the whole chapter 6, do you?
Don't we have the whole chapter 6? Didn't you pass that out
You
before
do.
the?
Well, you do, but it's also in the files. And I think you'd rather have those 2 pages marked up. So I'll do that if it's not on there. Okay. And one other thing I want to say is, if you guys have anything that's got to be revised, get it in. The most important thing you've done so far is the critical analysis of the dehumanization piece. So make sure you get that in, because that's a big chunk of your grade. If you're afraid that what you're writing is not strong, don't worry about it. Because if I tell you it needs to be revised, okay, it needs to be revised. And then I'll give you some comments, the things that you have to do to fix it, and you'll do it. And that, so everybody should get a B at least in this course. If you're aiming for an A, and you can talk to me about that, but I'm going to try to send out to everybody where they are right now. If you haven't turned in your design analysis, your rhetorical analysis, the grade I send you will be semi-meaningless, because that is a huge chunk of the course. The only paper that we're going to be doing after this is the research paper, just because we have to practice research skills. But it's going to be about global warming, or whatever you want to call that, the climate crisis we have. And what you're going to be talking about is not anything but mitigating it, because as we know, it's already starting. Probably can't be stopped, but the idea of mitigating means to slow it down so that we can actually live out our lives without, not being able to find water, or, having your children not develop their lungs right because the air is bad. So we're going to be looking at that. And there are things people can do. It's amazing. It's not so crazy. So I have to get those files together. It's a chunk of files. Create PDFs of them, and put them online for you. All right. Any questions?
No, sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay, so this is a recorded file. You guys can leave whenever you want. I'll hang in for a couple minutes and see if anybody has questions. And then when everybody's gone, I'll stop the recording. The recording they'll send me a message that this recording happened, and I'll be able to share that link with everybody. Okay. All right. So I'll see you guys next, Monday.
Thank you very much. Have
Welcome.
a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Appreciate you, Professor. You have a good one.
You too. Okay.